Hey there, and welcome to this is sort of a special episode of Speaking of. Normally, all you get to hear is me kind of going on about an issue or two, but today I've got a friend of mine who's going to join me, and we're going to talk about the issue of abortion and some of the ways that laws have been changing in our country. And we're going to get into some discussion about is that good, bad, or otherwise. And so I'm really actually kind of excited to introduce my friend Chris. Chris has been on, we've done a video or two before. So if you've been following the channel for a little while, you've already met him. But I'm really glad that he's back. And I'm just looking forward to some great discussion and some dialogue, hopefully in a way that will encourage some thoughtful response and thoughtful engagement. So, Chris, good to chat with you again. Thanks for being on the channel again.
You too, Rob. I think this topic can be a heated conversation, and I think that from it, I think it would be nice to be able to have people kind of understand that there's many things that we can disagree on it, but how do we come together and how do we basically understand, it as far as a legal? I mean, what kind of laws should we set up for it? And based off the laws that we see, is it helping? Is it improving things? Or is it making life harder for people? And
Right.
so I think that it'd be nice to maybe kind of split this up into kind of two topics. One, kind of what we see in the current laws, and get your take, Rob, on
Mhm.
what you see. So I think, and then kind of seeing how people are perceiving it. So the first one is the law. So, for example, let's take Texas, for example. They passed a abortion ban, and their physicians are struggling because people are going into hospitals and needing care, and they have physicians that are turning away, and it's causing issues where we're having people that are having to seek outside of the state, or having issues where like their health is at risk to the fact that they possibly couldn't even have kids. And it's really a concern that I understand the pro-life movement. But at what point do you look at your law and say it's harming people? Yes, you could say it's only 10 or 12 people, but is it worth not taking a look at it? And so, Rob, I'm not sure how much you know of like the issues of the Texas lawsuit and what's going on, but my concern is that when you threaten doctors, like you tell them if they do this, they can go to jail and get fined for just, you know, doing their job. I have a concern with that. I
Mhm.
mean, I believe that in my standpoint, Roe v. Wade was set 50 years ago. I think that it's a pretty good stance. I that's kind of the my standpoint of it is, um, and I see that right now with these states and some of these issues, I think, yes, I understand that you could say these are outliers, and and sometimes not everything is perfect. But my concern is that when you have legislation that is written and they see these issues and then they don't do anything to fix it. Texas, again, uh, they are trying to stop anything possible of these extreme policies, and they even went and suspended, the court case. They one judge tried to say, "Hey, in these rare cases, it's allowed," and then now you have politicians that are stepping in and say, "No, we still want it in place." And so I'm concerned about that. What does that look like to the people? Like
Yeah.
when you are harming people and people see this, to me it leaves a bad taste. Like,
So let's break that down a little bit because I think what you're saying is this creates a perception problem for the pro-life people, right? I mean,
yes.
in other words, pro-life people are very adamant on the protection and preservation of life beginning at conception. But I think what you're saying is that in their passion and their commitment to defend that, they've maybe not recognize that there are people along the way who are getting kind of swept along in that, and they're being harmed long term because of the way the law is written, perhaps, or because of the way it's implemented. Is that fair statement?
Yes.
So let's talk about the particulars of the Texas law. What do you know about that, and what does the law entail? Like, let's see if we can be as specific as we can. So it outlaws abortion, correct?
Mhm.
But is there a time, like outlaws abortion after a certain amount of months or weeks, I should say? Is it 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks? Are you familiar?
I'm just seeing on it. So give me 1 second. So I know that there's a lawsuit that is going towards their.
So just a quick
Yeah.
search.
So basically one of the bans, so it's basically called SB 8, prohibits abortions after cardiac activity is detected, which generally occurs around 6 weeks of pregnancy, keeping several plaintiffs from accessing care despite their pregnancies being non-viable. So the issue is you have some cases where they have a non-viable case and they are not able to get care.
Okay. So so does the law allow for exceptions when the life of the mother or the baby is at risk?
So life of the mother, yes, but you have cases where, again, if you have the life of the mother, maybe not at that determination is saying, hey, there's no risk, but the baby non-viable, they're not able to get care. And there's documented situations where somebody goes in and they find out that like brain has developed, it's not going to live. You have to go home. Until you get worse, we can't. You basically, in essence, have to be at that edge of you're in danger for us to be able to care for you. And that's like, I'm like, okay, these are people who want the child. It's like, I understand. The problem is that most people think abortion is just elective. Just, I want to go in, I don't want it. And they don't understand that abortion is more than that. And I think it's harming those. That is the concern that honestly I have in these laws in these states. And it just doesn't seem like they're trying to amend it to really protect these people.
So right, so the law, as I understand it, just a very cursory look at it, it does allow for abortion in the case where the life of the mother is at risk. But what you're saying is correct, that sometimes that line is blurry. When is the mother's life at risk, and when is it just maybe something we need to monitor? And so there's some gray area in there, at least in terms of the law. At least that's what the lawsuit is about. The lawsuit is saying that it's not always clear, and so that means that doctors aren't sure when the medical exception provision applies, which then means they delay providing care, and that in turn then puts the perhaps the future reproductive capabilities of the mother at risk because the doctor is delaying the care.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you have a doctor who's an ER doctor or medical doctor, like let's say ER, and you have a patient that comes in, to me, it's just like to have this law that basically can send them to jail. It's just, I don't know. I find that crazy. And again, no matter where you stand in this, I can't see you saying, oh, just, yeah.
So
And
let me
I feel
let
bad
me ask you a
that,
question
yes,
then about that. Are there
yes.
any cases where a doctor has been fined or jailed for their actions related to this case, to this law, I should say? Or is that just a sort of a threat or a possibility, sort of a hypothetical?
Yeah, so I do not know of any case where a doctor has been jailed or been prosecuted yet at the moment. But I think a lot of these physicians are very intelligent. They have obviously worked for hospitals that have attorneys and laws. And so I think they're being very precautious because, again, the laws aren't clear enough. And so they're, in their standpoint, they say, I'm not going to touch this. And again, then you have a patient that is not getting the proper care.
Mhm.
And that is the problem that I think we have in these situations. And Texas is not the only state. And I feel like that's, I consider like, when we have a situation where you have these people who are suffering and they're not making, and again, we can talk about, well, but it's protecting everything else. I guess my concern is, look at the numbers. Is these bans really doing anything? Is it moving the needle? Is it improving people's lives? Is it doing anything to really do anything? And I don't know if the data is there that these state. I mean,
So,
people, if they have money, they just go to another state. I
yeah,
mean,
so that's a question that I want to come back to in a minute because I think that's an important one, and I think that's where pro-life and pro-choice people would maybe diverge because really that comes down to whose life it would be improved by this legislation, right? Now, I'll
yes,
set that aside. I want to come back to that, but I want to focus still on the question of the law, and because I think what you're getting at is the law well written, and because there's always this issue when it comes to any kind of legislation or any kind of law that you put in place is number one, it could be just poorly written, and therefore it's very difficult to implement. And in which case, what you'd need to do is you'd need to seek some clarification for it. You need to mark out, okay, here are the cases in which there is a legitimate medical exception, and you'd have to find a way to define that. So that,
right.
but then, so that's one approach to it. But I think then the other question is, well, um, to what extent does and can pro-life law and or can the pro-life values be enshrined in the law to begin with?
Yeah,
You see what I'm saying? In other words,
yes.
is this just a case of, are pro-life people trying to do too much? Is it better to just, those are all kinds of questions that are related to that. Now, I'm of the opinion that, well, and maybe another way to say it is, um, yeah, well, let me stop there because I think what this gets at is how much and to what extent do you enshrine pro-life values in the law? And I'm of the opinion that it should be. I'm not going to necessarily say that it's always written in the best way or that it's always that it doesn't need some modification or some nuance, but that doesn't mean that the law itself is a bad law. And that gets into the morality of it, which we'll come back to in a minute.
Yeah, for example, just as an example in the Texas, is that there was a patient, and again, this is an article from ABC News that again, the denying she became septic while waiting to be sick enough to receive abortion care. She had multiple surgeries to reconstruct her uterus, 3 days in the ICU, and now her fertility is compromised. Physicians are waiting until the last moment because of the state's own expert testified that they're terrified that they cannot risk a felony or life in prison. And that's bad. I mean, any
Right.
way you look at that, that means, and the question, and again, I'm going to go, I'm sorry if I feel like a broken record. Texas is not fixing this. I do not see their people saying that should have been fixed on day. I mean, that's the problem, and it's that, and I think that now looks at people who may be on the fence, or maybe we should have something. The problem is I don't see. Again, Roe v. Wade to me was fine. I don't see why we should go anything more extreme. I do know that there's some people that say, like in Oregon, you hear talking points of people that say one side thinks says abortion up until the day of birth, which again is ridiculous. I don't know of anybody, any doctor that is basically delivering a baby at 39 weeks and basically says, oh, we can have abortion right now, 39 weeks. Nobody is doing that. And I think that
Well,
is
so
a,
I want to come back to that because I think
and so,
I
I
would
mean,
disagree with that. I think that does happen, probably not
I,
as frequently as maybe
so
some in the pro-life movement would like you to think. But
yeah,
here's what, because I want
here's the thing, Rob. One question. The problem is, give me an example where a healthy child, healthy,
to.
no problems, not going to be basically born and die within an hour. Well, give me an example of a healthy child at 36 weeks, 38,
Mhm.
where she comes in carrying this baby and says, I want it dead. No, at that point, it's a delivery. It is a birth. They are not killing. I would love an example. That's the problem. There's not an example where in America you have it, because again, prior to Roe v. Wade, we had third trimester rules around this. The Supreme Court set rules on this. So I don't see a healthy child. And here's the thing, most of those late term are because of women, and it's their health or the child is not viable. And a lot of those are just sad and crazy.
So I'm pulling something up on my screen here. Um,
Okay.
I don't know. I'm assuming you can see is Kermit Gosnell. Um,
Okay.
and here's what I want you to. Oh, I got to get my little annotation screen here. Here's what I want you to see. Um, he was convicted of the murder of 3 infants who were born alive using drugs to induce the birth, the manslaughter of 1 woman during an abortion, and several other medically related crimes. So this is a case, and it's sort of a well-known archetypal case in which
Mhm.
he performed abortions after delivery. And so this was in Philadelphia. He was convicted about 10 years ago on this. So it
Okay.
does happen. Now, again, I'm not going to try to argue that it happens all the time and it's like tens of thousands a year, but it does happen. And
And
here's the
and
problem with, I think, what for person on my side of the issue. Once upon a time, the idea of abortion was meant to be, and the famous words of it were safe, legal, and rare. That was put out by, that was a slogan that was adopted by the Democratic Party to promote their platform of allowing abortion, but they wanted to have it under certain circumstances. And it was sort of a concession to the right that said, we don't want this to be like rampant, but we want it to be something that happens occasionally. We don't want people going into back alleys to have their abortions. And so safe, legal, and rare. That was sort of the tagline of this movement. Well, we are now at the point where we've gone way past that. And so it sort of becomes one of these things where it's like you give an inch and then you end up going a mile, because we're not at the point where we're trying to keep abortion safe, legal, and rare, in my opinion. We're at the point where it's becoming it's a matter of convenience. You cite some cases, which I'm going to say something about that in a minute, but you cite some cases where you've got an abortion in the case of medical necessity. It's a threat to the life of the mother. I could live with that, actually. I
and
could
not
live with the
just
law that permits
necessarily
that.
the life, but
Or
the
yeah,
like
the long-term
in,
health. I mean,
in this
reproductive
yeah,
capability.
in this
Yeah,
case, again, if the baby is not viable, why are you waiting? I mean,
sure.
there's people that have had to deliver dead babies,
Yeah,
and that's the concern. But I understand, okay, serious case. So if somebody says I don't, in states that we just don't have any rules, it's not like we are saying that you can kill. So it's not like that person who got charged, and great. I am not in favor of that type of thing. So if I say, hey, I don't think that we should have rules, it's not saying that I'm okay killing a
right. Sure.
32-week, because
Right.
again,
And
what
I'm
they're
not
doing is
saying
they're
that you are.
delivering
I
that.
want to be clear
See,
about that.
yeah,
I'm
so
not accusing you of that, but
they're delivering a baby that's alive. You basically at 32 weeks, unless they're killing it in the womb, but it's alive. It can live outside the womb, and then you kill it. That is, to me, murder. And that's
right.
why a lot of people, like, again, you hear these talking points that one side of the politicians that don't want any sort of rules, They must just
Mhm.
like they're okay killing these, and that's not. I feel like in the general people, most people on the left are not saying, "Yeah, I'm just
Right.
okay." No,
And I
and
think
I
that's helpful because I think it's a reminder that people on both sides of this issue have this tendency to caricature people on the other, right? In other words,
yes,
pro-life people must always be these fanatical people who, care nothing about people and the legitimate struggles, and people on the left must be these radical people who just want to kill babies outside of the womb, and neither is really accurate. And so I'm glad you bring that up, and I'm certainly not thinking that you're that way. But my point is just that there does seem to be this momentum that has moved culturally over the last 30, 40, 50 years from Roe v. Wade and then safe, legal, and rare
yeah,
to, yeah, well, it's actually, it takes some of the responsibility off of people for their choices. Because if we're talking about the cases that you cite, there's a friend of mine who's a lawyer has a saying, and he's kind of taught me this. He says, bad cases or tough cases make bad law, right? In other words, sometimes you get into these complicated issues, and those are the ones you really don't want to try to make your laws based off of those tough cases because there's so much nuance and so much complexity. So, you cite this case of a person who goes septic while they're waiting, and to that I say, yeah, those are some of the more complicated cases where we want to maybe we need to change the law a little bit to allow for to allow for abortion when the health and vitality of the mother and the life of the mother certainly is threatened, is
yeah.
particularly when the pregnancy is not viable.
But I mean, ER doc to me, I understand that you elective abortions at a certain point that
Mhm.
you want to prevent that. But again, an ER doctor to be able to just write a will, ER doctor, no punishment to when you threaten somebody with I mean, I
Mhm.
just feel like it's extreme. Now, a point on this is going towards pretty much where where most people stand in this, and now we start looking at states that have had laws on the ballot, and how they're voting, and we're looking at I want to burn up two states, Kansas and Ohio. These are pretty dominantly red states, Republican states. Kansas wanted an amendment that would ban abortions. That got voted out, and then in Ohio recently, their measure won again by about 55 to 45. These are red states that vote red
Well,
typically
Ohio is a
for the
swing
people.
state, though, right? So Ohio, I
Well,
wouldn't put Ohio in the red. I would put
but
it as a swing state.
if you look lately, I wouldn't consider Ohio a swing state. If you look at the way that they are, their districts, how many Republicans they have in their House and
Mm.
Senate, I would not necessarily consider them necessarily to be a swing state. But again, most of these states, there's not a state that I've seen where this measure has gone to the people, and the people have said, you know what, yeah, we should have an abortion ban. So now it's okay. I understand that you feel like it's gone this way, but what does the people, what is their consistency? And I feel like these measures from the politicians are not in line with their people, how they feel. I think that they are just out of line. And if you look at Ohio, Ohio did everything possible in the book to try to ban it. They first said, tried to pass a law that 60%. So back in August, they tried to pass a measure where a constitutional measure would have to have 60% vote versus 50 plus one. They knew that that would it. Then they also tried to change the language within the bill. And even today, they're trying to, some of them are trying to get it out of the hands of a very conservative, pro-life Supreme Court in Ohio, and they want the legislation want to be in charge. They're trying to do everything possible to stop these things, and it's just the people have spoken.
But
They
then
would
the beauty of our
so
system is that there's a price to be paid by the legislators who create laws that are out of touch with the people. And I do think that abortion will be one of these issues that defines the next election, right? So, in other words, if what you're saying is true, that the wishes of the people are
But
um,
but
out of
I'm
line,
not
then
saying
then
I'm
that
not
will be
saying
reversed come the next election
yeah,
cycle.
I'm not saying that it's this is not my opinion. This is fact of what we see these
Mhm.
states. Every single state has voted to either have it as a right or refuse a ban. This is not my opinion. This
Right.
is fact of how people are voting. And so I believe politicians are out of touch of reality of their people. And I think because when you have a law for 50, when you have a right for 50 years and it's taking away from you, I think you're going to get pushback.
Right. And I'm agreeing with you on that. I'm just saying that the way our system is set up is that now the people who believe that they're not being heard, and I
Mm-hmm.
think especially on this issue, because I think that's what cost the Republicans some of their victory last election cycle. I think it was the abortion issue tempered the enthusiasm for Republican legislators. So if what you're saying is true, and I think I'm willing to concede that it is, then what we should see in the next election cycle is that the Democrats will pick up more seats, and then you can work and they can do what is necessary to reverse that. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit, and I want to talk about the morality of this, because it's one thing to put laws in place and to ban or not ban or to allow exceptions and so on, but it's another thing when you say, what about the morality of this? And because here's the thing, even Christians will debate on to what extent should you, as we sometimes say, legislate morality. In other words, to what extent should we try to enshrine in law what is moral? And for example, as a Christian, I believe it's moral to participate in the life of a church, but I would never want that enshrined in law, right? I don't ever want it to be said that if you don't go to church on Sunday, or if you know go grocery shopping or whatever and violate the Sabbath as it once was, then you should be penalized. I don't ever want that. um so there's debates and differences about when do you enshrine morality into law, to what extent. It's not always as clear as you might think. um But what about the morality of this? You said that you don't, a baby that's born after 37, 38 weeks is viable, and you don't want to terminate that pregnancy. So
No,
then my
it's
question is, so when is that line for you? When would you say, okay, after this moment in time, after this length of pregnancy, then abortion should be off limits in all but the most extreme cases?
so so for me, what I look at is there a problem in, basically to me, I feel like in a free society, you grant all rights and you take away rights when needed. And so I look at this as, do we have a problem where this needs to be resolved? Are babies being killed when they're viable? Is there something that needs to be done? Is there something that needs to be fixed? And so I think that's first what we need to look at is in when we had Roe v. Wade, what was the issue there? Was there a problem that needed to be fixed? And so I feel like, again, I believe in body autonomy, but I've also heard the arguments from body autonomy. I've also heard the arguments from consciousness. When does consciousness begin? There is, again, very good people out there that have good arguments around about 20 weeks. So for me, I do, the problem again saying, hey, let's just have a ban of 20 weeks. But then we have the issue of what happens in these cases in Texas. Again, I don't know if necessarily I'd be okay with a ban that basically throws anybody in jail or fines anybody when they're just trying to help
But now
people.
you're
And
talking more about sanctions there, though, right? As opposed
yes,
to the
I'm
law.
talking about sanctions, and so that's the problem is that um, so when you have sanctions, that's the why am I concerned? I believe in body autonomy. I believe that women should have the right to choose. I think that at a certain point when somebody is pregnant, at a certain point, most likely they want to keep it. In these rare situations like you brought up, again, do we need a law? Is there a problem? Is women going in at 26 weeks when the baby is almost viable, it has consciousness, and are they aborting them just because they don't know? I just don't want to be pregnant anymore. Is that happening enough where we need to pass laws? And that's where I'm at, is do we have a problem? If we have a problem, great, let's fix it. If not, it's like building it's like having a law where there's no, I mean, I'm going to set a law. Is there a problem? No. Then why are you setting the law? I mean, if there's no problem, if people, like, again, I see no issues. Again, I'm a pretty much Roe v. Wade type person, because I see no issues. I think that it worked. I feel like, again, the pro-life still was not happy, but I don't see any problems with that. So
So
I would say
what do you
basically
think are
what
the
they,
reasons? What do you think are the reasons that women have an abortion?
I unfortunately, to me, it would be speculation. Again, unless there was data collected from people of their reasons why, depending on how many people, I unfortunately I would not be able to really know. Again, um, how much? Okay, so you have something on your
I
screen.
got something here.
Yeah,
So
and
I don't know how
so
clear it is. I'm going to try to zoom in just a little
yes,
bit.
it is pretty clear. I see it well.
So
So the question is, I guess the biggest thing is the sample size. Like, how big is
well,
the sample?
so yeah, and we could analyze that, but let me say this. This is from Guttmacher, and the Guttmacher
Okay,
Institute is a left-leaning organization that studies reproductive and sexual health in the United States. So
okay.
generally, they are generally considered a really a good and reliable source for this kind of research. Now, I'm not going to, it's not a hill I'm going to die on. If we could always look at and evaluate the credibility of the study, or that's always a valid question. But Guttmacher is known for doing pretty good research. So here's some of the things. Oops, I got to get my annotation tool here. Here's some of the things I think to pay attention to. 1 second. Oops. Well, anyways, having a baby would dramatically change my life, interfere with education, employment, career. So what it's showing here, oh, here's what I'm looking for. What it's showing right here, 74% in 2004, 78 in 1987. So it's a sample size of 1160 and 1900 there respectively. But you can see that, you can see that, I mean, that's a high number, especially in 2004. So this data is a little bit old, but still, the reasons are not. And if you go down, I'm trying to find where medical,
So I still see the reasons. I don't see the table anymore.
Oh,
Do
okay.
you have two screens?
Oh, okay. So maybe let me try this then. Maybe that's the problem I'm having here, because I think this is
At first, I saw the table, and then I see that you
and
went
then
to the
okay,
article,
let
and
me
then I
check
saw the
that again.
73 and 74.
All right. How about this? Is that the table?
Yeah.
Okay.
So then
So here's
I see on the
yeah,
left.
yeah, I can
So it
scroll
looks
up.
like, yeah,
I wish I was better at using these tables, but
yeah,
alas, I am not. But I'll put that over there. Okay. So here's
yeah.
having dramatically changed my life. Here we go.
Mm-hmm.
You have to go all the way down. Whoops. Let's try this. You know what? I'm just so bad at this here. But you have to go all the way down here to the very bottom to see the category of a victim of rape, pregnant as a result of incest.
Yeah.
So that's and the number of that is like really low, less than 0.5% both times, 1% in both times. So that's
Yeah.
that's pretty low,
Yeah.
I think, right? So
Yeah. and I wouldn't disagree that that's not the main reason, but I believe again, so basically my thing is body autonomy and the fact that people nowadays have had this right for 50 years, that in some areas it's been stripped away and we're seeing people vote on it. And I understand so the morality is kind of tough because again, I can find a Christian who is pro-life and you can find Christians who are pro-choice that say again, I don't mess with the right of the woman. The woman's body is her own, and so I can find Christians on both sides. You could probably find atheists on both sides of this matter.
Sure.
And so the problem is that again, you're coming from a different stem of morality of when should we grant somebody rights, and in essence it's kind of like special, in my sense, special treatment rights. When should we grant somebody this, and should we just say, okay, you're pregnant, you can't have abortion? I mean, is that really where we should be? Do you believe that as a country that we should be, you can't have abortion unless so in your standpoint, do you believe that there should be no exception for what I would consider to be, what's the word? Elective. Do you think there should be no elective abortions?
So if by elective abortions, we mean abortions that are primarily centered on, reasons of convenience, those top categories in the table.
So no reasons of rape, incest, the baby's dead. So it just say, hey, I got pregnant, for whatever reason, not necessarily convenience, it happened. Right. I don't want to be pregnant.
Yep.
I want an abortion. Do you believe that if there should be any reason for those at all?
Right. I'm opposed to elective abortion. So if I could probably live with exceptions in the case of rape and incest. Okay, I can get that. Although morally, if I had my way, even that I believe is a life. Okay, so I believe even under, I would rather the child be given up for adoption. But if that was the law, I could live with that, more as a concession. But I get that. And if we're talking about an abortion that is meant to preserve and save the life of a mother, that I get. That's a painful, difficult situation, but I can live with that. But again, most of the occasions that we're talking about, most of the reasons given are these elective abortions. It's not a good time or finances or whatever. Here's what I think is really important, and I think this is a significant change that has taken place in the last more than 50 years, because it preceded Roe v. Wade, and that is that sex was separated from the act of procreation, right? So in other words, the 60s, what happened during the 60s was the sexual revolution, and more importantly, the advent of the birth control pill. What that did is it said you can have all the fun that you want sexually, right? Okay. But you don't need to worry about the consequences of that. And therefore, sex and the responsibility of creating life were sort of torn apart. And in a way, in a way that's unfortunate. In another way, it's like a lot of things. There's a properly used, I think it can be a good thing, but it can also have a negative consequence, which is that we've begun to rethink our whole conception of what sex actually is meant for and what it's about. 75 years ago, my parents, your parents, grandparents, whatever, they would not have really, they would not have thought of sex apart from the possibility of creating new life. And now that's all changed. So now it's like, so what happens when you get pregnant is, well, I didn't use birth control. I didn't, forgot to take the pill or whatever else. So pregnancy then is seen under those conditions as an interruption to life. And like you talk about bodily autonomy, which is the assumption that is sort of baked into this, that is, I have the right to do whatever I want with my body. Now, in some ways, yes, that's true to a point, but I think the question that is demanding to be asked there is, well, what about the life of this child that is created, right? There's this life that is created. And so my bodily autonomy then comes at the expense of this new life that now exists, like it or not. And that's where I think the pro-life movement stands up and says, that's why we have to protect and advance pro-life. Now, again, how do you nuance that in the law? That's a challenge that I can see that's a hard one sometimes, because you do get cases
Yeah.
of, yeah, the woman whose life is in danger, and now the doctor doesn't know if he can perform the surgery, and so on and so forth. So yeah, that gets difficult.
Yeah.
Um,
The problem that I see here is when you have a starting point where that humans are special, made in the image of God, or what, and that basically this is all for us. We're here to do life and then hopefully go to heaven. The problem is when you have that, um, then you have a certain issue because again, for example, there's been studies on human activity has been changing and destroying the habitats of this planet and animals that need to survive. So because human populations are growing so fast that animals and plants are disappearing 1,000 times faster than they have in the past 65 million years.
mhm.
At what point our human growth is going up and animals are this? If you look at, have you driven that much I-5 in the
Mhm.
past like 20, 30 years? When you would go down through California, your windshield would be just covered with insects. I went down there and there's hardly anything. I feel like we are destroying everything else, and we're saying, "Oh, this life is we have to have more humans." I mean, you have sex, and that's the
Well, so
consequences.
so I,
So
I want to I
it's
want to challenge your
so
logic here.
so basically, and I think it is a proven fact that humans are doing damage to the environment. And again, I feel like, again, I understand that this priest, you can say, well, it's because you don't believe in God or you don't believe in the Bible. And I can relate that if there is a God and the earth was just made for us, then I
No,
guess who cares what
let
happens to the animals? But again,
yeah.
I just think
Let
that
me so let me, and I want to wrap up here in a minute or
I
two,
know.
but let me challenge the logic here, because I think what you're doing is you're throwing out a red herring.
No,
Um,
I understand
because
that you may think it's a red herring, but what I'm saying is, I'm just trying to show that for body autonomy, the damage to the environment, I think that people should have rights, and then that people are speaking up and they're saying, "I want this right." And so to say that, well, no, you shouldn't have this right, and these politicians, they have control over you. Is that a true democracy? Is that really a democracy, or are we an authoritarian? I know better than you, just
so
whatever.
yeah,
And
so
that's
so
what
let
I
me
feel
let me
like in these
respond to a
red
couple of those
states.
points. First of all, I think Christians actually have the greater foundation for creation care than secular people, because Christians should, underline that word, should be strong advocates of caring for creation, cultivating it in a way that's healthy and sustainable, right? I don't I know lots of Christians who are very strong into um promoting care for creation and for the natural world. I know of many secular people who actually really don't care that much for creation. So I think if you are a
I,
fully, if no, again, both sides, right? I
I
know
consider that
Christians who don't care about the environment
so.
too.
I
But
and I
but here's
consider
here's my point. Here's my point on that.
what I'm saying is, Rob, okay, I understand that you're saying that, oh, I know Christians are this, but what I'm saying is we can look at the evidence. Humanity is whatever from our activity, we are lowering from our activity. I'm not saying there's anybody to blame other than humans. We are affecting life. But again, if you want to stick on the abortion thing, the morality thing is tough because again, um, everybody's coming at this at a different level in morality. Again, I
Mhm.
can. Some Christians are pro-life, some are pro-choice because they feel like again, it's not my business. It's not my business to push my morality on you. So I feel like morality is a tough one because how do you come together when there's a lot of differences? But I think that we can come together and talk about, okay, do we really need these laws? And I think that's where you get buy-in, and I think that's where you're going to
Yeah,
get
well,
people. And I think
and
this
that
next election is going to be devastating, possibly, for us for the right, because
It
again,
might
I
be.
don't think they don't have buy-in. I don't think they
It,
have people that are on their side anymore.
it very
As
well could
many.
be.
They don't have enough,
Right.
is what
It
I'm
very
saying.
well could be. I think that's a possibility. But keep in mind that um, Christianity is not a subcategory of conservative politics, although granted, sometimes it looks that way, right? Ideally, Christians
No.
should be able to be critical of both left and right, because in to use Christian terminology, the kingdom of God is not a subset of the Republican Party. It's not a subset of the Democrat Party. It should be unique. And so the values under the authority of God should, some will align more with the left and some will align more with the right. So that's just something to keep in mind. The last thing, and I want to close with this, is um, the government. There are all kinds of places where the government puts laws and limits in place that interfere with human desire, human impulse, human wishes, whatever. That's the nature of law. So when you talk about, well, the government is interfering with our own autonomy, the problem with that is, I mean, I can say to that, I say, well, yeah, that's true.
Mhm.
But the government does that in other ways as well. The government puts limits, for example, on what you can say in a crowded theater, right? You can't yell
Yes,
fire in a crowded theater. That's a
yes, but
limit for the benefit and the flourishing of society. And so I
that
would
is correct.
argue that, and there's other examples too. I can't go into a city park and, expose myself because I say, well, I have bodily autonomy here. No, there are limits to that. And that's a function of, now, yeah, there's always debates about where does that begin and where does it end. And I
Yeah,
recognize the complexity there, but just saying, well, my body, my choice. Yeah, not so fast on that, because
yeah.
to put a limit on that is to recognize that it's not just your body, it's also the body of that little tiny baby that is now growing in you and is dependent on you for life. So I'll
Yeah.
give you the last word, and then we got to wrap it up.
And and you've made some points to that. Hey, you don't have the ability of just going in and screaming fire, or you don't have just running naked because you're nudist, and because there's rules. In America, in other countries, you can be nude in your car. I mean, so some countries are different. But here's the thing: when it comes to body autonomy, when you pass away and when you're dead, we can't just harvest your organs just because you're dead. You don't need them,
Mhm.
but we don't, because again, it's really honestly for those that are still living, your family. Again, we don't just harvest your organs. So I believe that body autonomy, a woman should have the right. And again, where does that right end? And again, my standpoint, I've listened to some really good arguments. 20 weeks consciousness. But again, I'm not for again sanctions, putting people in prison. And but the thing is that people that might have my view, if you want to change that, then you're going to have to, I think, and again, everybody's different, create, I think, better arguments, I believe, or a reason why we should be more strict on this. And with evidence, I think that is a good way of doing it. But for right now, and here's the thing I want to say in closing: there's people that have had to go get abortion because fetus dead, and they've had to walk to the facility, and they've been called baby killer. They've been yelled at. I think standing in front, yelling at people, screaming, really is not the way to do it on any side.
I could not
Harming
agree with you
people,
more.
threatening people,
Yep,
that to me, that is wrong. As a society, that we
absolutely.
need we need to be compassionate,
Yeah.
um and really, and again, this is the problem, is this is a very passionate topic. But to me, it's just like, it's we need to, I think, do a better job on communicating and talking to people, and really, how, when we're looking at things, is this a fact issue, or is this, an issue of morality, and where are we basing it? Are we starting with God? And then that's the problem, is that if somebody who doesn't believe in God, they may have a different take on this. And how do you correlate? Because again, America no is not a Christian nation. We're not founded on Christian values. We're not meant to be a Christian nation. If I believe that if America became a Christian nation, we would not be America anymore. We wouldn't, if we were a theocracy, we would not be America.
That is an
And
awesome
so,
topic. We have to do a video on that. That would be a fun one to
so,
discuss.
so I, you know, and the thing is that, um, that's the problem is that, and I think really the takeaway is when you're looking at this, look at it all sides and say, okay, what would change my mind? Or trying to just have a conversation with people. I think that we've become very polarized on both sides. I'm not saying one side is the right and the other side, that they're doing no wrong. I think there's people polarized and very vocal on both sides. We've seen it.
Yeah.
People laying down on the street and not letting cars because of climate change.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that this is the way that we really get people to change their
Well,
mind.
that's a good place to end, because that's actually a point of agreement. I don't think it's a way to do that. I don't think it's a way to make your point either. So we'll end on a very congenial note and a place where we agree. Chris, thanks for joining me.
Thank
It's
you.
been great to see you. We'll have to do it again sometime and get it out there again. So thanks for being a part of it.
Perfect. Yeah.